Morning, everybody. For this presentation, like the previous ones, we'd really like to thank all of the people that have contributed in the past. It's a collaborative effort, and we really appreciate their efforts. So in the significance section, I've highlighted the key words straight from the instructions and what you should include. And I know that you saw some of these yesterday. And then what we're going to be doing is looking at 3 applications from proteges and highlighting where we found these kinds of this kind of wording and that they address these kind of things, or point out some places where there might be an opportunity to include these. So what we're recommending is that you take this exact wording right out of the instructions and use it in your application. As Elena said yesterday and several other people, that makes it easy for the reviewers to find these critical words. They're like little guideposts in your grant application. So you can see the words here. And I think someone yesterday said that they keep a list of these things right up by their computer or right on their desktop as they're writing to make sure that they're being constantly reminded to include them as they write. I think one of the more difficult things to do is to achieve this clarity of purpose. We have broad ideas. We have lots of ideas about what we want to do, but you really, for a grant application proposal, need to get a laser focus on what you're trying to accomplish and be able to communicate that to the reviewer. So your wording should convey your purpose clearly, enthusiastically, and concisely. So to do that, one of the things I'm going to suggest is that you use words with positive valence in your grant application. So positive valence words are words that evoke happy and positive thoughts as you read them. We're using priming of positive valence words to help build a positive attitude. Also, don't be tentative. Be proactive and be confident in your grant proposal. We'll talk about some words that are tentative. And also, do your best not to be vague. So here are some words with positive valence: improved, original, opportunity, new, productive, innovative, exciting, creative, interesting, constructive, advanced, important, and you can probably think of a lot of other ones. Now, you can use these adjectives, and if what you're proposing is not these things, it's not going to do you any good. So it really does have to be these things, but once you have that in your content, in your proposal, this will help create a positive attitude. So what are some words that convey a tentative stance? If. In science, we use if statements a lot, but they shouldn't be the kind of if statements that are casting doubt on whether something will turn out the way you think it will. You can use the word if for contingencies and cover both sides of the contingency. That's important. But what you don't want to do is raise a problem and not address it. May. Can you think of a replacement word for may that would be more positive? Hope. We hope, and I've seen this in a lot of grant. We hope this happens. Well, of course we do. We hope it happens, but better not to say it that way. Might. That's another one. It might. Really, in your grant application, you want to plan for every contingency and help the reviewers know that you've thought through the different things that could happen and what you'll do with each one of them. Same with could. It could happen. Perhaps. Do these words evoke a car sales ad to you? Do they make you feel like, people can't really say what this car will do for you, but it might do it, so we're hedging our bets? You don't want to hedge your bets in a grant application. Possibly. Vague terminology. In child language, we say the thing and stuff words, but certain aspects, that's not too specific. Some properties, a general outcome, the overall conceptualization, improved understanding, observed change, improved outlook. These might be big picture things that can happen, but when you start to use terms that aren't real specific, good for you to think, is there something more specific I could say than the more general thing? Another recommendation we introduced last year was this book. You can look it up on Amazon if you'd like. But one way to start, or maybe to back up if you're having difficulty having that laser focus, would be to think about something like this. Can I say in a few short sentences really what I'm trying to accomplish? So here's an example. A real quick description of your topic. Then can you explain what you think the theoretical significance of that would be? What would be the clinical significance of it? Is there a potential practical application? And why is it innovative? So if you can summarize what you intend to do starting with this kind of an organization, chances are you're going to be able to expand it quite clearly. And as someone was saying yesterday, you really need to be able to present your program or research in your grant in a 30-second bite, a 2-minute bite. This kind of thing will help you do that. Another important thing to do is to think about integrating a story into your grant application. Who said yesterday? Lisa, did you say it should read like a novel? It should read like an action novel. So so on one hand, we're talking about wordsmithing and making sure that you're using good grantsmanship and you're getting the wording in there. But on the other hand, you really need a story to unfold. And then, like any good writer, you're trying to combine these two things. So what is the story you want to tell in your grant application of the problem? What is the problem? It's an interesting problem. It's an important problem. Where does that problem come from? Is it a theoretical problem that we don't have a theory in a particular area, or that the theory's been stuck kind of at this level of conceptualization for a period of time, and if we could move beyond that, I would suggest new lines of research. So why is it important in your story that you're telling in the grant? What are the gaps in knowledge that you're particularly interested in your story, your research story? And how will your innovative approach then? You're the hero of the story, right? Your solution to the problem is the aha. Here comes the main character. You're the main character, and you're solving the problem that you've had the opportunity to build and to build credibility for in your background section. So you want to explain the problem and what is known about that problem right now in this day and age. Important that you're backing this up with current research, that the reviewers know that you understand the depth and the breadth of research, and also contextualize what work have you done so far that is helping to build the story. It might be published research, it might be pilot data that you have, it might be part of your training even. But if you've contributed in any way to this work, you certainly want to highlight that. You want to propose the next step. Why is what you're proposing the next logical step? Other than solving world hunger at the very end of it, what do you want to do right now that's important? And, of course, we discussed yesterday, you really need to situate your problem within a theoretical framework or at least a model to show how you fit in with history and how your part of the story fits in with the longer plain story. So here are a couple of examples to highlight the gap in knowledge or barrier to progress. So I'll give you just a second to read this. So can you easily pick out the gap or barrier to progress in this first paragraph? I think the problem is it's difficult to determine the links among physiology, vocal function, measurement, and perceptual quality. And it says not only that it's a problem, but explains very quickly and concisely why it's a problem. So then, here comes the possible solution to the problem in a very short amount of time, very short amount of space. Here's a significant statement. There's the word significant. Might even want to bold it. Explains clearly and concisely why this proposed research is significant. This is the kind of quote that Elena was talking about. You could lift right, a reviewer can lift right out of your grant proposal and put it into their significant section. Here's another significant statement from one of our proposals that combines both the theoretical and the clinical significance. And in this proposal, we listed 4 areas that we felt were contributing both theoretically and clinically to the research base. And then we also highlighted the population that we were going to serve because we were going to include because we felt that was innovative as well. These studies address important problems, so you're going to spell out for reviewers exactly what the important problems are and what fields they're likely to impact. That comes right out of the instructions about saying how you're going to be addressing important problems. Also, the keyword, it will advance scientific knowledge in these ways, and it will significantly improve methods in these ways. If you can't figure out how it'll do it, the reviewers can't figure out how it'll do it. So you need to figure out yourself ahead of time and put it in your application. Innovation. Yesterday we discussed that innovation can be its own section, and often people do make it its own section with a header, but it's also important to weave innovation and words around innovation throughout your whole application to create an overall positive representation of your work. So you want to use these keywords in your application, seeking to shift current paradigms or seek to shift clinical practice. Great to put that wording in your application. The proposed work will shift current clinical practice of X by doing Y. Takes one sentence. What's novel about your proposal? There are many different things that could be novel, and you should highlight each of them. The theoretical concept, your approach, your methodology, the instrumentation you propose to use. Great if you can explain why what you're proposing has an advantage over what's currently being done. Sometimes just a refinement in a methodology is an important step forward. Sometimes there's something that's been very successful. I think Holly, an example Holly gave yesterday, where this book reading intervention has been tried with typically developing children, never been tried with children with language impairment. So that's a novel application of a fairly well-tested intervention. So weave the intervention as you're telling your story, weave in about innovation. So here's some things that are innovative: a new theory or model, different application of an existing theory, bringing in a theory or model from another field that has particular application, applying a normal theory to disordered population, new and better experimental methods, better instrumentation, new and better approaches to analysis. Here are some things that are not innovative, and we have to fight against. All of us have to fight against them. I'm using the technique of the day to think that everybody will be interested in because it is the new hot thing to do. Collecting more data because it would be interesting to know about it. So you have to be careful about that word interesting. That in and of itself is not innovative, and really the bane of all our existence, conducting research because very little is known about this particular thing. There might be a very good reason very little is known. Maybe nobody cares one bit about it, but you. And remember, you're going to get a lot of money to study this, so it needs to be something that people care about. Here are some lines out of different people's grants with innovation statements. It seeks to shift current working memory paradigms in children by testing, shift current word learning paradigms by using this. The proposed methodology goes beyond typical measures of word learning. a novel word learning battery, shift current research and clinical paradigms by studying a large, diverse participant group. It's innovative because our collaboration itself is innovative. So what I'd like you to take a minute to do here is turn to your mentor and see if you can say, my study is significant because, and follow that with, my study is innovative because. Go ahead. I think a really hard part about this is being concise and capturing the essence of what you're doing. If you can't capture the essence, I think often you haven't got the essence yet. So I think this is a good exercise for you. Good exercise for me too. All right, a little more on grantsmanship. I said use and highlight the key words from the grant package and from the scoring guide. You should have the scoring guide that the reviewers are using right there beside you when you write. Tape it up on the wall, put it on your computer screen. Don't go down side roads. And many of the applications that I read for here and when I review, you see that people have a love of many areas, but often the love of that area doesn't feed directly into the purpose of the grant. So it's important to not go down dirt road. Don't let your train go down a dirt road. Stay on track. Careful, accurate review of research with the appropriate scope of research and citations. The reviewers know the literature quite well, and if you haven't done a good job with your literature search, and if you don't have a command of the literature in the area, it will show. And use your positive valence words. We talked about figures. Defining your terminology is really important. Not only don't use acronyms, but when you're using a term, make sure you're defining how you're using it, because different fields use the same term differently. We talked about including white space. The editing, I don't know about you, I really need to see paper. Now, how many of you that review print out grants anymore? So see, there's still 4 or 5 people who actually print them out on paper. Probably half the people in the room print them out. So you need to make sure that if you're a better editor on paper, go ahead and print it out and edit, as well as editing online. Really, you should not have any typos or grammatical errors. 0. You should have 0. And I think we have about 10 minutes if you have questions or discussion. Yes. I think there's a difference between your hypothesis testing and saying that if it turns out this way, this is what it will add to our field, and if it turns out this way, and building your story on a whole series of ifs that are contingent on one another. You know, one of the things I know reviewers will always be concerned about is, for example, if the results of specific game 2 are contingent on a certain outcome from specific game 1, because then if it doesn't work, you've wasted money. And so if you write with a lot of if statements, it kind of sets up that kind of expectation. I think that's different than hypothesis testing.
So the if my study is not like the intervention studies, it's kind of basic science study. So for the significance part, can I kind of imply clinically important because not for directly this study, but in the future, in the kind of long term, can I mention that? Or still, if it's not specific, it's better just not mention clinical part?
I have an opinion, but does someone else want to? Yeah.
I guess my thought is that they're funding the work you're proposing now, and so that work needs to have impact. You know, if it has impact 10 years down the road, I don't really want to pay for that now. So that's kind of my feeling.
I think what it doesn't do is it doesn't use that space to really boost the feeling about your current work. If it has obvious clinical implications down the road, I think they'll be fairly obvious. In my opinion, you would be better off to be really specific about the positive theoretical and clinical or just scientific benefits of your proposed work right now. Often we can see clinical benefits down the road, but there's so many steps to get there that what we can't see is what is the next critical short-term step, especially for an RO3.
I'm Dan Sclair from the NIDCD. I would add to what's been said, you have the advantage in a fellowship application or a career award application of demonstrating your vision 5 and 10 years down the road. So I think that showing the impact of a more fundamental study down the road to the field is going to be easier because you're doing that within the context of tracking the vision of your own evolving research career. So I think you've got a leg up in showing significance and impact. And also, don't walk away with the impression that fundamental or basic science is in itself not innovative. It can be extremely innovative. Of course, its translatability and impact to the field is another issue. I would integrate the two. And I agree with previous comments that both Shelley and Holly made about the importance of showing innovation even in a fellowship proposal.